Hello and welcome. My name is Nicole Imgrund, and I am the owner and director of Rivers Edge Counseling Center. And tonight's talk is part of our Wellness Matters webinar series. And tonight, our title is Fostering Compassion with Paitan Molde, and I will introduce her in just a moment. This is part of a series, and you'll see on our website on the blog page that we have about 75 of these posted from the past, and so you're welcome to look at any of them. We also still have one coming up actually two coming up in this spring series, Self-Care for Self-Care Partners, and that is on May 25th. And then on June 8th, Know Thyself, Personality and Happiness. And soon after that, we'll be posting our schedule for fall again as well. A few other announcements from Rivers Edge. One is that we have an event that's happening in October. We're bringing Tarek Haddad, the founder of Peace by Chocolate, the chocolate company in Nova Scotia. You may have heard them in the news lately when President Biden came to Canada. That was the gift that Canada offered. Tarek and his family were refugees from Syria, where they had a chocolate factory that was bombed out. They made their way to Canada, and it is just a beautiful, inspiring story. And that event is going to be in support of the St. Albert Food Bank. So you're welcome to join us for that. And also on May 24th, we have a pre-event for that, where we have someone coming and sharing some information about what is resilience, since our event is called Celebrating Resilience, and tying it into the Haddad family story. And at that time, we're going to raffle off a few sets of tickets for the event as well. So you're welcome to join us for that online event. That's no charge. And one last thing, we are starting to launch some programs, some groups and psychoeducation programs, and they've just been put up on our website today for fall. So keep your eye on all of that. We're always happy to have you. Our presenter tonight is Paitan, and Paitan is a student completing her Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology degree through Yorkville. If I understand, you're very close to finishing. You've handed in your last assignment. Yeah. So yeah, just waiting for the paper. So congratulations. And we've been so fortunate to have Paitan as a practicum student at Rivers Edge. And she has been with us since September, and she'll be with us through the summer. Previous work experience is with the nonprofit sector, supporting survivors of sexual violence through the RCMP reporting and court process. And at Rivers Edge, she has been working with teens and adults. When working with clients, Paitan practices from a client-centered, holistic approach with a strong emphasis on fostering a safe, warm, and non-judgmental space to build a welcoming therapeutic alliance. She believes that the client is the expert of their own experience and works hard to honor that in sessions. Every client presents with their unique set of concerns and needs, and Paitan strives to provide individualized, unique care for each client. And with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Paitan. You're welcome to post questions in the Q&A or the chat. Paitan should have a few minutes at the end of the hour. We can look at those. If there's any technical issues, I'll be keeping my eye on the chat. And one last thing to say is we will have her slide presentation along with the video to post afterwards. So you don't have to work too hard to keep your notes and keep track of all the resources. Okay, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. All right, can everybody see that okay, Nicole? I'm putting faith in here that we can see what we've got going on.
Not quite yet. That's the right one. Exactly. We got it.
Perfect. Okay. So tonight we are going to talk about self-compassion. And this topic is one that I really, really enjoy. I think it is so great. It's something that we can integrate into our daily lives. I don't want to call it an easy practice because it definitely is not that, but it is one that you can practice with ease. And I really want to put emphasis on the idea that it is a practice and a cultivation, which leads us really well into the self compassion idea as a whole, because really, when we talk about self compassion, we really put a lot of emphasis on being gentle with ourselves. So, like anything, when we do learn something new and we start implementing it, it can pose as a challenge. And it's one of those challenges that really reinforces the idea of resilience. So, when you first start, it's not going to be super easy. It might be a little bit difficult, but the more you practice, the more you work, the more you're mindful and notice these maybe negative thoughts, some self blame or criticism popping up. It's a great time to implement some self compassion ideas. So that leads me to the definition of self compassion. So, self compassion is an attitude or a mindset formed from the mindful cultivation of replacing self judgment with self kindness. Self compassion includes the way we speak to ourselves and the emotion tone that we use when we speak to ourselves, about ourselves, when we speak with other people regarding ourselves. I know that definition seems a little bit broad and might leave you wondering, like, well, what does that even mean? It kind of is a general idea, which leaves it to be pretty individualized for people. So, what I think self compassion is may be similar to yours, but I may have different practices that I implement in my daily life. I may have different ideas of ways that are compassionate for me, and that might not land with you, and that is totally okay. Just like you guys might have different ideas, practices, or views on self compassion than I do, which is yet again another way that we really can tailor these practices, tools, strategies to ourselves and to what feels good for us, what looks good, what fits well into our daily life. Somebody that we're going to talk about quite a bit throughout this presentation is Dr. Kristen Neff. She is what I like to call, and I'm sure some other people would agree with me, like the founder. She's one of the founding fathers, for lack of better words, of self compassion. She has a lot of great ideas, a lot of really great resources and tools on her website, which we'll look at a little bit later on in this talk. And we actually will get to see her throughout. I have a couple of videos from one of her TED Talks about self compassion. She does a great job explaining and getting the details across. So I mentioned self-kindness in the other slide, and people like to use self-kindness and self-compassion interchangeably. Really, it's whatever fits well with you, your vocabulary, kind of how you want to define it. Again, really individualized here. So self-compassion can be viewed as like the umbrella term. Which incorporates self kindness, mindfulness based practices, noticing our moments of self judgment, self criticism, self blame, and really that whole idea that as humans, there are common instances of humanity. There are some common things that we run into, some common human issues and struggles that reinforce the idea that we are all human, we all struggle sometimes, and we also have a lot of things that we can celebrate. So, again, just really maintaining a mindfulness approach towards the idea that, yeah, we're human and sometimes things can really suck, but sometimes things can also be really great. So, when we talk about self compassion, there's three main elements of it. And we're going to look into each one a little bit more in depth. So, this slide just gives us a brief overview of what these are. And the three elements are self kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. So, when we look at self kindness, we want to look at it as self kindness and then versus self judgment. The reason that I bring up self judgment is just to show that juxtaposition between what self kindness is like what self-judgment is like, and then really bring that awareness so that we can notice when we are having those times that we're feeling really hard or really down on ourselves, really having that inner critic volume, the loudest voice and volume at the table. And then common humanity. So, again, reinforcing the idea that we are all humans. To some degree, we experience the same struggles or we experience some of the same things that are celebratory, some great things. Really reinforcing the idea that we are not alone in these difficult times in our lives or these great times in our lives. We're able to celebrate these things together, and we're also able to lean on the people that are important to us, that feel safe, that care about us in those times when we need to. And I bring up isolation here because so often we find those difficult times to feel really isolating. It can feel like nobody understands me, nobody's here for me, I'm going through this on my own. And then the mindfulness versus over identification. So, mindfulness is just really being present, really noticing what we've got going on for us in that moment, bringing awareness back to our body, seeing, is our heart racing? Is our throat feeling a little bit dry? Are your hands maybe a little bit sweaty? Connecting with that body, connecting with the present moment, and really feeling, seeing, and noticing what's going on. Throughout this, I'll probably say noticing a lot. Connect back, notice what was going on in your body, notice what was going on through your head, what was going on for you in that moment, being really mindful and connecting back to the present moment and connecting back to yourself. So, to get a little bit deeper into this, acts of self kindness demonstrate warmth, understanding, and a general kindness to ourselves. We accept our pain with kindness and sympathy for ourselves when we're engaged in the act of self compassion. So, this picture I love, it's showing this girl giving herself a nice warm hug, which is what I like to compare self compassion to, that feeling of a warm embrace from somebody in times of need, or from your mom, family member, somebody that you really love, that feeling of being connected, loved, cared for when you get that warm embrace. So, self kindness fits in really well under this umbrella because we're being kind to ourselves, we're being gentle, we're giving ourselves an understanding viewpoint rather than having that inner critic do all of the talking and name us negative names or give us negative feelings, negative thoughts, negative experiences around this. And three aspects of self compassion can all be done together. You don't have to demonstrate self kindness on its own, mindfulness on its own, or common humanity on its own. They all kind of intertwine. And as we work through the rest of the slides and the presentation, I hope, my goal is that we're able to see, you guys are able to take that away, that these things aren't separate. They all kind of ebb and flow together, just like the general idea of self compassion. I like to name the three facets of it, kind of these three pillars, and they're all equally important together as they are on their own. So, again, the common humanity is that normalization and understanding of human suffering, shifting that idea from I and me and my struggles, these are only happening to me, there's something wrong with me, or I am a failure, or my pain is not valid because other people have it worse. Shifting those mindsets to understanding and remembering that as humans, we experience this universal suffering and pain. No human is a stranger to the feeling of suffering or pain or hardship or inner critic. And when we allow ourselves that mindset of like, yeah, okay, I do feel this, other people feel it, and normalizes the fact that we as humans struggle. And then mindfulness. So mindfulness is talked about in a lot of different things. I'm sure you guys have heard about it many times and in many different areas of your life. And I think it's a really great practice to incorporate throughout your daily life or whenever you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious or however that may show up for you. So you may be wondering, well, what is mindfulness? So, as I mentioned before, mindfulness is the awareness of the present moment simply for what it is. Noticing that I am here, I am on earth, the sky is blue, I could be really struggling right now, I could be feeling really sad or overwhelmed, I could be feeling happy, I could be feeling immense joy, however that's looking and feeling for you. I apologize if you guys heard that in the background. And again, this is one of the foundational concepts to self-compassion and many other areas of our life and therapy in general. So I included this little quote down here, and it is from Dr. Kristen Neff, who I had mentioned before. And it says, "We cannot ignore our pain and feel compassion for it all at the same time." And I really love that. I think it speaks volume to the way that both of these emotions and feelings can coexist. It doesn't have to be one and it doesn't have to be other. We are allowed and able to notice that this instance or this experience is really challenging, it's really hard, it's really hurtful to us, but look at it through a lens that shows ourselves kindness, understanding, and compassion for what we're going through. So, the question that I'm sure many of you are here for is, why would we even practice self compassion? Self compassion addresses a lot of self criticism, self judgment, and self blame that we may face in our daily lives. And when we experience self criticism, we're put at risk to have a poorer sense of well being, mental health status, and it can create greater mental health issues and struggles for us, as well as strained interpersonal relationships and relationships with ourselves. So when we hear that, I mean, it probably doesn't sound all that fun. When we are struggling with our relationship with ourselves, we then struggle with other people, maintaining those relationships. We struggle with our sense of well being. There can be thoughts and foundational beliefs of, I'm not good enough, or what is going on? What is wrong with me that I'm struggling right now? And those questions, those thoughts, self criticism poses a breeding ground for shame. And Dr. Brene Brown, somebody who I also really love, but we don't talk about too much in here, minus this quote, has a ton of great work on shame and vulnerability and braving through that shame. She's another one whose work works or goes really well with Dr. Kristen Neff. They both are wonderful. I am pretty biased because I love Brene Brown. And anybody who knows me knows that I talk about her all of the time. So to fit that, I had to include a quote by Dr. Brene Brown. And down here it says, self-compassion is key because when we're able to be gentle with ourselves in the midst of shame, we're more likely to reach out, connect, and experience empathy. And I know that's talking externally, but I wanted to turn that internally and gear it towards that self-compassion lens, that when we are being able and we have the capacity and the tools to be gentle with ourselves in those moments of shame or those moments of hardship, frustration, however that's showing up in that time, and we're brave and we reach out and we connect, we're able to kind of wipe off that shame, recognize the shame for what it is, recognize that shame is talking right now and that it's okay that it's talking, but it doesn't have to have the loudest voice at the table. And the same with self-criticism. These things and these voices that come up with us are there for a reason. Sometimes they may be there to protect us. They've protected us in the past. They've served some sort of purpose. But when you remember that you can talk to yourself with kindness and with empathy and that compassionate lens, it quiets down those voices and reminds us that we can make it through here. Okay, I'm going to give you guys the first break from me talking, and we're going to watch just a quick little excerpt from Dr. Kristen Neff's TED Talk. This is a great talk. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but if anybody is interested and does want to watch the whole thing or wants the link, please feel free to reach out to me via email, or I can even send it to Nicole and we can attach it with the speaker note, or not the speaker note, sorry, with the presentation, and then you guys can access it directly off of the River's Edge website.
Criticize ourselves, we are tapping into our body's threat defense system, the reptilian brain. Okay, this system evolved so that if there was a threat to our physical person, we would release adrenaline and cortisol and prepare for the fight or flight response. Now, the system evolved for threats to our actual bodily self, but in modern times, typically the threat is not to our actual selves, but to our self-concept. So when we think a thought about ourselves that we don't like, that's some imperfection, we feel threatened. And so we attack the problem, meaning we attack ourselves. And with self-criticism, it's a double whammy because we are both the attacker and the attacked. So self-criticism releases a lot of cortisol. If you are a constant self-critic, you will have constantly high levels of stress, and eventually the body, to protect itself, will shut itself down and become depressed in order to deal with all the stress. And as we know, depression is not exactly the best motivational mind state, all right? Luckily, we aren't just reptiles.
Okay. So the reason I included that was because Dr. Kristen Neff does a much better job at explaining the biological part, and it gives you guys a break from me talking, but I thought that it was really important to shed the light on the biological effects that stress and self-criticism and self-judgment has on our body. And I'm sure we are no strangers to stress, but again, just reminding us what happens in our body when we do experience stress, that cortisol that gets released in our body, and then the effect that it has then on our thoughts, our motivation, and how we're organizing in the world. And again, this is not to say that self-compassion is going to cure all of this, but it is a practice that can aid in decreasing those levels of stress, judgment, self-criticism that we're experiencing, which then will lower that cortisol that's released in our body and really help us navigate through those times when we would often fall victim to self-judgment or self-blame and negative self-talk, and reframe that mindset to maybe I did the best I could there, or I coped the only way I knew how in that situation, or you've never experienced something like that before and you made it through, and that's evidence that you can do hard things.
Criticize ourselves.
Okay, so again, we're going to watch another piece of the same TED Talk, and we're going to take a deep dive or a deeper dive into looking at self-esteem versus self-compassion, and just notice the difference between these two things.
We've done some research comparing directly self-esteem and self-compassion, and what we find, what you can say, is that self-compassion offers the benefits of self-esteem without the pitfalls. So it's associated with strong mental health, but it's not associated with narcissism or constant social comparison or ego-defensive aggression. It also provides a much more stable sense of self-worth than self-esteem does, because it's there for you precisely when you fail. Just when self-esteem deserts you, self-compassion steps in and gives you a sense of being valuable, not because you've reached some standard or you've judged yourself positively, but because you are a human being worthy of love.
She was going to say worthy of love, and that is my bad for having that cut out too soon.
We've done some research.
Okay, so just to kind of wrap that up a bit, I think it's really important to remember the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion, where self-compassion really translates into that state of living. There's no expectation or narrative to reach something. It is always there, even if our self-esteem is feeling really low or feeling lower than typically would for us, below that baseline. We still have that general idea and feeling of self-compassion in those times. And when we put a greater emphasis on our self-compassion and being gentle with ourselves and reminding ourselves that we are human, we can slowly start to build that self-esteem up, either from that situation or when we go back and look at that situation that kind of knocked us down a little bit. I briefly wanted to just touch on some therapeutic framework, and that is acceptance and commitment therapy. Now, this is not the only therapeutic framework that self-compassion works with. I think that's really important to note, but it is one that has a high level of research done around in conjunction with self-compassion and lends well to itself because they are pretty similar in that way. Um, ACT, which is the acceptance and commitment therapy, does not explicitly utilize self compassion, but they fit kind of cohesively together. They fit really nice. It makes sense to have them coupled with each other. So when we use ACT with self compassion tendencies, it has shown a lower negative self talk level and lower negative automatic thoughts. And what a negative automatic thought is something that pops right into your head and it is negative about yourself. So, an example of that is, oh, I can't do that because I'm not good, or I'm going to avoid going golfing because I'm bad at golfing. And you may maybe never have golfed before, but there's this automatic negative thought that comes in of, oh, I'm bad at golfing because I'm not athletic, or I've tried to engage in sports before and hadn't done well. So then creates this automatic negative thought around golfing and our ability, which they're not always true. And that's important to note, to challenge those thoughts and notice and pull in the mindfulness piece of self-compassion around, okay, is this something that is true, or is this my inner critic talking to me and making me feel shame or making me feel this sense of self-judgment or negative about myself when there's nothing to back it up? So now we're going to get into some tools, because I think it's really important to have some tools for you guys to add to your tool belt, to leave here feeling like there's something that you can practice, you can bring into your daily life with self-compassion. Now, again, Dr. Kristen Neff created these. These are not my ideas, these are hers, but they are super good practices. And I do really love these three in particular. Her website has some really great ones as well. It was difficult to choose some, but these three, especially exercise number 2, because I love journaling, felt right. They felt really good to put into this talk for you guys. So the first exercise we're going to look at is, how would you treat a friend? And what happens for you when you treat yourself like you treat a good friend? The next one we're going to look at is a self-compassion journal. And then the third and final one is challenging critical self-talk. So again, I have this little picture from Dr. Brené Brown, and I love this quote so much. And it says, talk to yourself like you would talk to someone you love. And this is one of my most favorite parts of self-compassion. And I find myself using this one even in my personal life when I am introducing self-compassion with clients and my friends, or anybody that you come across when you're experiencing people speaking really negatively about themselves, or you're really finding that self-judgment is leading the conversation, really slowing it down and thinking, okay, would I ever talk to my best friend like this? Or would I ever talk to somebody who's important to me in my life, somebody who's a friend, loved one, the way that I'm talking to myself? oftentimes when we ask those questions, the answer is no, I would never say that to my best friend, or I would never talk to somebody that I love or care about that way. And then it challenges those thoughts around, okay, so it's not okay, or you wouldn't feel comfortable talking to somebody that you love in such a harsh manner. So, what makes it okay to talk to and about yourself that way? And really challenge those thoughts. So, the premise of this exercise, again, ties back to mindfulness because it requires us to be mindful in the moments that we are noticing that negative self talk. So, when the self or the negative self talk comes up, those thoughts that are not nice, they make us question our worth, or they make us question who we are and what we're doing. Writing down those key phrases or those key thoughts, even a couple words, or just keeping a note of this, like a mental note, a little mental sticky. I know some people prefer keeping a note on their phone because it's something that they always have. And then writing down those key negative phrases, really looking at them from a self compassion lens and remembering that I wouldn't talk to my friend like this. How would I talk to my friend? And then walking through that. So, an example of this, a negative thing that we could say to ourselves, especially, I mean, everybody probably experiences this, but I know as women, when we look in the mirror and we think, oh, I look horrible today, my makeup didn't work out, or my hair looks bad. And men, I'm sure you experience this, non-binary folk as well, that, oh, I'm not feeling good today. I don't look good today. And noting that. So the negative thought there is, I don't look good today, or I'm ugly. And then challenging that thought, thinking to yourself, okay, I would never tell my friend, oh, you look ugly today. You would probably word it in, I would hope, a more kinder, softer, gentler way. And then noting how you can re-say that to yourself. And this can come in so many different forms. One of them could be the form of an affirmation, which I also really enjoy and I think have a lot of value. And affirmations are not something that have to be done in the mirror. They can be something that you just tell yourself in those times, or even times that you're not engaging in self criticism. I know a lot of times people like to wake up and use affirmations in the morning, part of their morning and daily routine. But yeah, just replacing those negative thoughts and thought patterns that we have towards ourselves and thinking about how would we speak to somebody that we love. Because when we're able to love ourselves and we have that good solid relationship with ourselves, we're able to give that in a more genuine sense and empathetic sense to other people. Okay, so the exercise number 2. So for this, we need to remember all of the different parts of self-compassion, and they don't all have to be super long. Like if you maybe want to focus more on mindfulness one day, more self-compassion another day, more calm and humanity one day, the freedom is all yours to tailor this journal to however you would like it and whatever feels good for you. So for the mindfulness piece, we want to bring awareness to that painful emotion. So this can be done a number of ways, but one way that I'll focus on just for the sake of this example, again, is a painful experience throughout the day. So you can note this right away when it happens, or if you like to journal before bed or you like to journal in the morning, you could reflect on something that had happened previously or something that you're noticing repeatedly comes up for you, or maybe a rough part in your day, however that's looking, bringing awareness to that painful emotion and painful experience that had happened as a result of the self-criticism and the self-judgment speaking quite loudly that day. And then we're going to, again, try to reframe that into a more accepting and non-judgmental, kinder way for ourselves. So the mindfulness piece, again, really just bringing that awareness to that moment, present or past, however that's looking, and then attempting to respond to it in a more kinder, accepting way. then to broaden it out a little bit further, bring in the common humanity piece. So thinking of how this experience is then connected to the human experience. So that could be in a number of ways. It could be on a very broad general level, or it could be more concise, more personalized for you. However that looks, whether it's I'm suffering today or I'm feeling hurt today, and I know that this is a human experience and that I'm not alone in that hurt. Other humans I know, people that I love who are close to me, also experience hurt. Drawing that attention to that normalization of these difficult emotions or painful experiences. And then for the self-kindness piece, we want to use kind, understanding, loving words when we're talking to and about ourselves. So often we can get stuck in that trap of speaking, so kindly, so highly of other people, and then having that really difficult time doing the same thing about ourselves. And there could be a multitude of reasons as to why we're uncomfortable sharing positive things about ourselves. It could be a learned behavior. It could be that the discomfort is just too great. We would rather avoid it. It feels maybe selfish when we talk about ourselves in a positive way. It could feel like we're trying to brag or bring attention. And again, noticing that negative connotation around how we're feeling when we speak about ourselves in a positive way. And then wrapping all of these together and rewriting that message using those kind, compassionate, understanding words. And this journal does not have to be intensive. It doesn't have to be lengthy. It can be however feels good for you. It also could just be a journal prompt. It doesn't have to be the main focus of your journal that day or that week or whenever you choose to do so. Really give yourself the permission and the freedom to explore what's coming up and get curious around the thoughts, the emotions, how you're feeling, checking in with your body throughout that experience, or checking in with your body in the beginning, seeing how you're feeling. Is there anything that you're noticing in your body? Any tightness in your stomach, maybe those butterflies, some knots, and then doing a mid check-in. So when you get to the time that it is to respond kindly, then what's going on in your body? Again, really just bringing that awareness back to the body, back to you, back to the present moment, and grounding yourself throughout these experiences. And then the third one. So we cannot practice compassion with other people if we can't treat ourselves kindly. So again, really reinforcing the idea that in order to cultivate self-compassion, and compassion for other people, it really starts within. And when we're able to give ourselves compassion, or we're able to give other people compassion, it feels so genuine and almost like it just rolls off your tongue when you are practicing it within yourself. I'm sure that there are so many people who know how uncomfortable it feels when we give ourselves a compliment or we treat these situations that have been really difficult with compassion. It can feel uncomfortable. It might even feel wrong. And that's another great place to get curious around, okay, what's coming up here? Is this shame that's talking? Am I feeling shame for feeling compassionate to myself? Or is it judgment? Am I judging myself because I'm speaking to myself kindly rather than speaking to myself hurtfully or rudely or mean? However that's looking. Okay, that is it.
Wonderful, thank you. So, and I understand that I somehow had the chat disabled for a little while, so I'll give people a chance if you have a question to put that in or a comment. For those of you who need to leave now, I just want to thank you very much for spending some of your Thursday evening with us, and we're happy to have you anytime.